Today we are going to read The Spring of Northern Country, an article written in April 2001 by Mr. Zhengfei after a visit to Japan to learn the survival story of winter. We set foot on Japan in a warm, fresh, sakura-feeling spring, yet we did not go for the exotic spring, nor did we go to see the plentiful cherry blossoms. We were here to learn the survival story in winter. On my arrival, I found Japan was the same as 10 years before. It was peaceful, auspicious, clean, wealthy, and comfortable. The country, from remote villages to busy metropolis, everywhere looked clean and in order. The people weren't varied either. They were kind, smiling, polite, and always in a hurry. From the waiters in the noodle restaurants to the elderly ladies in small village inns, and to the white collars in big companies, everybody seemed undisturbed, optimistic, obsessed in their work. They were so grateful for having a job, for the opportunity to provide services, that work seemed to be their best enjoyment. No impatience, no grievance, nor complaint. To me, Japan was still the country 10 years before, and the people still lived the way they had 10 years before. Who would have imagined that in the past 10 years, Japan suffered the longest and worst winter since the end of World War II? What impressed me particularly was that the society and the people had not changed after a long time of low economic growth. Most Japanese companies have not increased the salary of their employees in the past 8 years, yet the public order here is even better than that in the Scandinavian countries. What a country! Once the Japanese economic takes off again, Japan will soar higher than any expectation. If Huawei were to experience 2 successive winters, could our people be as calm to overcome the difficulties and wait for the spring? Since the early 90s, Japan has suffered a whole decade of low growth, zero growth, or even negative growth. The winter was just too long. How did Japanese companies survive it? What were their difficulties? How did they manage to solve problems? What can we learn from them? Huawei has enjoyed 10 years of high growth. Can the company maintain long-term sustainable development? Will it also suffer low growth, even a long one? What are the problems in the organizational structure and the management of the company? When the growth was high, the employees were promoted rapidly. But will they be able to cope with the frigidness of the winter? Will the fast-growing cash flow stop? What should we do to keep the cash flow at least running to stay away from stagnation? These are the inevitable questions before winter that will loom up sooner or later. Better prepare winter clothing now than later. Then, how should we provide against the winter of Huawei? In a small tavern in a remote village, we came across a group of Japanese tourists. These warm-hearted retired people sang Song of the Fishermen for us. We joined them in the famous Japanese folk song Kitakuni no Haru, Spring of Northern Country. Their optimistic and carefree attitude and enthusiasm strongly appealed to me. By comparison, the like generation in China has endless things to worry about every day. Our fathers and grandfathers carried a heavy burden in life, which they never managed to unload until the very end of life. I had listened to Kitakuni no Haru hundreds of times. The eloquently simple lyric never failed to bring tears to my eyes. The song was written to the honor of the pioneers and fighters, not a love song as believed by the young people today. Mother's love was always with the young man away for a career of his own. She didn't know in her remote mountain village that spring was just round the corner in the city where her son stayed. She stitched up a cotton-padded coat and dispatched it off to keep warm for her beloved son in the cold winter. Oh, dear mother, I will never ever be able to receive, even just once more, your parcels of courgette hautania, mountain herbs, and spicy sausage. They were my sweetest memories. For all parents in the world, their children, no matter how far away they have gone, are never far from their minds. I have written an article reminiscence of my parents, which was translated into English and Japanese and passed around in my Japanese friends' companies. They thought that it was a very filial song, but they didn't know that at heart I felt the warmth of conscience and even agony. I did not take good care of them. I put it all into my work and forgot my duty as a son. When one leaves home, he lives for a good life. In a good life, love is the most important part. Love is like a single plank bridge. If someone is under the bridge, you have to back off. 5 years. It has been 5 years since I left home. Melting snow gurgling under the single plank bridge. I can help thinking, someone already on there? Is she well and happy? With that unfathomable sadness, I reckon a successful career is pale and weak. In my home village, behind the juice marrow flowers amidst the morning fog, were the quietly turning water wheels and the familiar huts. The jolly songs were heard, and my reticent father and brothers were there. Most of us could not have gone to college without the sacrifice of our fathers and brothers. They had no education, but it was their hard work and hard-earned savings that supported the lonely students like us far away and made them what they are today. Never should we forget them, forget to repay their love and forget to respect them. Oh, father and brothers, please take it easy, will ya? Please make time to relax a little, even in the most difficult times. So every success we had comes from the sacrifice and contribution of our families. From the cotton-padded coats mother sent to us, from our reticent fathers and brothers, from the water wheels, the huts, and the single plank bridge at home, and from the girl ones we were with. Kitaku ni no Haru is a song of the struggle of the Japanese people. I have known about the hard work of the Japanese. Without their hard work, the country could never have risen from the ruins of World War II in just 20 to 30 years. The Japanese are good at refining. They impressed the world with their achievement in the era of product economy. This time I saw their endurance and optimism to overcome difficulty in times of economic depression. Japan is a narrow island country. The smallness of the land and the mountainous topography shape a people that are good at refining big, heavy things into small, light products. Their refining work becomes a habit. A tiny garden is perfectly crafted. Street, however short and narrow, is always made so clean and delicate that every corner is pleasant to the eye. When we think of Japan, we think of the small but powerful cameras, the electric household appliances that sweep across the world market. A country that produces no coal, iron or oil, but manufactures quality automobiles that are sold everywhere. The hard-working Japanese, together with the persevering Germans, stood prominent in the world in the time of electromechanical industry. It was their hard work, commitment and sacrifice that created prosperity. Now the country is not in economic difficulty, but the people remain tough, hardworking and optimistic. They keep their faith and never change their love for work and life. Hard work, as before, will pay off eventually. I believe they will survive the harsh winter. In the post-war 50s, Japan's economy was fed with military orders and the US support. The 60s and 70s saw the economic takeoff of the country. At that time, value was created in the manufacturing process and Japan was the world center of electromechanical products. After the Cold War, the United States disclosed immediately the military technology to civilian use, igniting the growth of information technology. With information technology injected into industrial usage, industrial added value rapidly shifted to the R&D of core technology and the sales. The opening of the manufacturing industry turned into a highly competitive and low-profit contract manufacturing industry. Japan had advantages in manufacturing and so suffered all the more frustration. In the 70s, when it was a time of mass production, bulk sales, and high material productivity, the economic growth rate of Japan was 10%. In the 80s, when mixed innovation and knowledge productivity took over, the Japanese companies did not change their growth model accordingly. Soon, they were pushed away from the center of the world economy. The economic growth rate dropped to less than 4%. In the 90s, the Japanese companies remained more or less the same when such trends as economic globalization, added value of knowledge, and information society were at the stage spotlight. Suddenly, Japan found itself left out of the high growth community with a 2% growth rate. The Japanese companies were once very successful, but it was not possible to rely on one growth model to sustain long-term growth. In that regard, will the growth model of Huawei always be successful? The patriotism of the people made it difficult for foreign companies and products to develop in Japan. For example, years ago it was often found in the media that most Japanese traveled with Nippon Airlines. Of course, good service was one of the reasons, and brought Japanese rice and soybean sauce with them on an international tour. Foreign presence in Japan was not enough to stimulate competition. Without competition, there was no innovation. Japan failed to keep its economy vitality. The lack of innovation is a big problem for the Japanese companies, but the real culprit of the failing economy is the huge amounts of bad debts in the real estate sector. During the economy boom, Prime Minister Tanaka Kakue formulated a program to transform the island country. When big money was chasing limited land resources, the land price shot up and the real estates boomed. Every year, hundreds of trillions of yen were invested in real estate. Under the double attacks of the Asian financial crisis and the consequent sharp decline of its innovation-deficient manufacturing sector, the real estate's price plunged. Many real estate owners saw their assets vaporize overnight and were left heavily in debt. Their creditors, mainly banks, will face bankruptcy. If these non-performing debts are not removed, the Japanese companies will never be able to turn around. If, in the good days, Japan had diversified its culture, introduced foreign talents, improved education, removed egalitarianism, promoted internal competition, turned national cohesion into new creative power to keep its manufacturing industry strong, and gradually cooled off the real estate fever at the same time, its economy might not have failed. The talk with Professor Takeuchi, Japan's senior national advisor, was very useful and thought-evoking. Japan does not have many wise people who know about the country, problems and the way out. I believe the problems are a matter of a structural adjustment. Once they solve it, the economy will recover. Compared with Japan, China has great advantages in economic development. Japan's infrastructure is so well developed that one can hardly find a place to go in for construction. In China, the demand for infrastructure is huge, not only in the wilderness west, but also in the relatively developed east. As an industrial country, Japan enjoys a praiseworthy, well-protected environment, but loses its appeal to capital at the same time. In China, we need billions and billions of dollars to restore the sacrificed environment in the East. In Japan, it is really difficult to stimulate internal demand because people are well off and the education system is developed. In China, investment opportunities abound. Poverty alleviation in the West, re-employment project for laid-off workers in the East, housing for 1.2 billion people, good public transport system, cultural advancement program, education for all, construction of multimedia primary and secondary schools in the rural area by the government, and modernization of the existing universities. Once the internal demand is stimulated and the whole society is mobilized, the continuous investment will ensure 20 to 30 years of high growth. In due course, however, we must take precautions against what happens in Japan today, stagnation. Countries of high welfare like Canada and the Scandinavian countries are faced with the problem of brain drain caused by the high taxation and the high level of welfare. We need to learn from their lesson to keep the ball of our economy rolling.